Greetings. Greetings. Welcome to Conversation with Tony Mobley. Today is April 8th, 2026. This is episode 12 of 2026 for Conversation with Tony Mobley. This conversation uses the TV broadcast software Mimo Live and Zoom. Conversationswithtonymobley.com is our website. We have an interactive chat that's called Mukana, and that's courtesy of Alex Lindsay and 090. And if you choose not to use Mukana because you can ask questions, those questions can be voted up or down. However, if you choose not to use that, you can always use the YouTube chat to ask your questions. And we are going to get started right away. And we're going to just start with, first, I want to say welcome, Cabral Huff, to Conversation with Tony Mobley. And we're going to get right into who is Cabral Huff. Greetings, sir, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
I appreciate it. Long time coming. Obviously, you know your family. So, who am I? I'm the son of Willie Harold Huff and Geraldine Bolton Huff. They made me who I am today. Everything about me is because of them. Um, they spent so much of who they were to make sure I had what I needed to be successful. So every day, every moment, everything that I do, I try to make sure that I'm doing it to recognize their sacrifices for what they were able to do as an only child. Sacrificing putting me through private school, first through fifth grade. Sacrificing whether it was mom, dad, I want to go, on this trip to, overseas when I was at Mays High School. But the most important part that I remember about my parents, and which is instilled in me today, is that servant leadership, like being, serving others. And Tony, you know better than most. Like there wasn't a time my mom wasn't opening up her door to feed somebody or let somebody stay at the house. There wasn't a time my dad wasn't going to help somebody with their yard work or whatever he could do around their house. And I think that's just been an embodiment of me and who I am is because of them. And I think that's what led me to where I am today. It's just that attitude of servant leadership, making sure I can give back to somebody else and impact somebody other than myself. So all praises go to them. And then the other part I'll say is I'm Atlanta through and through. So anybody that knows me knows I love Atlanta. That's where I was born and raised. I'm one of the few people that love every team that's from Atlanta, good, bad, or indifferent. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, I'm gonna tell you by yourself because I done gave up on the Falcons. I done gave up on the Falcons, and I'm really kind of really struggling with those Hawks. So
We were back into it now. Like, come on now. We've been I think we probably got the best record in the second half this year. They got the right pieces around. They're young and up and coming.
well, then we definitely want to take what the coach says about the Atlanta Hawks. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And so I guess as I just want to say before we go any further that Cabral and I have a special relationship in that he is also the god brother of both my sons. His mother, Geraldine Huff, was a good friend to me and my wife. And when my sons came around, she was selected as their godmother, and um, I'm getting a little choked up about that. But I really wanted Cabral to be here tonight so that we could have this conversation because he's doing some amazing things. He has done some amazing things. And so we're gonna ask you to talk a little bit more about your family. But before we do that, I want to reach out to those who are watching on YouTube. Please ask your questions. Put them in the chat because Cabral does a lot of different things and working with students and does recruiting. it is a special occasion that we were able to have him here. He's on the road recruiting and interacting and doing a lot of things on the college campus. So this is a rare opportunity for us to have him here tonight. So please ask your questions on YouTube or ask your questions in Mukana. Now, please talk a little bit more about the support that your family have given you in terms of who you are. For example, you talked about some of the sacrifices that they did. I know for a fact of some of the sacrifices they did in terms of you going to college, but even before, um, we are both Morehouse men,
Right.
and please talk about that part of it as well.
You know, college even back then was expensive, right? So um, I could have went to a lot of different places and probably gone without them having to lay out a dime, right? But I wanted to go to Morehouse. That is where I wanted to go. So it meant my parents had to sacrifice some of how they were going to get the extra money that a scholarship wasn't going to pay. Because if anybody doesn't know anything about Morehouse, I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't a 4.0 student. I was kind of smart, but I wasn't a 4.0 student. So I needed a little extra help as far as money wise. And my parents, made it happen. They made it work because my mom and dad wanted better for me than they had for themselves. Um, I I remember this thoroughly when I graduated from Morehouse and got right into teaching. Um, and I never knew it before, but I made more than my parents had ever made their entire lives. And when I saw that moment, it really stuck. It stuck home with me of how much they sacrificed and why. And then I even can go to family members. I think of uh, my aunt Jen on my dad's side who made sure that I got my first car. Your sons were able to ride in that car, a lot of times, when we went places. So it's I think of, Pauline Anderson, who was my mom's best friend. You know, I think of all my uncles on my mom's side, excuse me, uh, who at some different time impacted me so much, whether it was Uncle Robert, Uncle Kenny, Uncle Thomas, uh, Uncle Curtis, all those guys, Auntie Jan on my dad's side. So that family aspect has always been big for us. And Tony, you know this more than anything. There probably wasn't a time on a Sunday that there wasn't a Sunday dinner at our house, or we were going out somewhere. So it was always big for us to be around family, even though I was the only child. Um, I think those things are things that I always remember. And as I'm talking right now, I'm picturing my mom and dad. Uh, it's a picture I probably have shown, but when I got that degree from Morehouse, it was everything that both of them could have ever imagined. And so I just remember those moments, uh, and I just try to continue to live so they can be happy of who I've become and I continue to become each and every day.
Thank you, sir. Um, again, uh, Cabral's mom was very, very dear to both myself and my wife in terms of, um, I'll just real quickly just share that we met at we met at church, and when Dr. Parker of Morehouse was selected as pastor at Butler Street Baptist Church. Um, as one of his students, I went with him to Butler Street Baptist Church, and there I met Cabral's parents, and his his dad was the first person that I met that came up and just put his arms around me and told me that I was welcome. And um, his mother, his mother, from day one made sure that I was able to put my feet under her table for many meals, even before I got married, and that was the beginning of our relationship. And so, again, I'm not seeing any questions from the community. And I'm going to say again, this is a rare opportunity, community. This is an opportunity. Please ask your questions. Um, so, can you start talking to us about your coaching journey,
Mm.
from the standpoint of maybe, you know, well, before we even get to that, let's talk about you as let's talk about you as an educator.
Mm.
So you graduated from Morehouse and you began teaching, and tell us what that experience was like.
It was a whirlwind, only because I went to Morehouse as an English major, and my job, or I thought my career path was going to be uh, as a broadcast journalist. Maybe broadcasting the NBA or NFL or Major League Baseball game. And I realized that by not playing professionally in one of those sports, I may not get there. So at that time, what I thought was Plan B became Plan A, and so I began taking education classes at Spelman. Um, Even got up into did student teaching at Frederick Douglass High School in Atlanta, Georgia. But I was probably a couple of classes short from actually getting that minor in education. So I did Teach for America, and what Teach for America does is they streamline you fast and they throw you right into the fire. Um, so when I got accepted in Teach for America, it's a whole process where there's a essay interview, and they ship you out to Houston. So you do an intensive, 6 to 8 week course in Houston where you're teaching, half the day and you're learning the other half and trying to understand what it is to teach. I never knew I would get placed back in Atlanta because that was the first year they had ever done Teach for America in Atlanta. Um, and so I was placed at Booker T. Washington High School. And that's where I met someone who very much so reminded me of my mom in every way possible. And that was Dr. Shirley Kilgore, who was the principal of Booker T. Washington High School for the time I was there. And she threw me into the fire. I was teaching, 12th grade English lit, and I was teaching ninth grade English lit, and I was over the newspaper and yearbook as well as coaching, basketball and baseball. So my days and nights were very long. But what I remember about that time is some of the young men and women who who now are young men and women who I've been able to just try to make an impact. And now as I continue to grow older and I hear from those students, I think I was able to reach them, whether they remember the quotes that I had on the board that we talked about on a daily basis, or I was even on a podcast with Chris Moore, who's now in Memphis, Tennessee, uh, and he got into doing kind of what you're doing right now, Tony, because he was in that journalism class. Um, and I just felt as a black man, in what people want to call an inner city, predominantly black school. I just wanted to make an impact so they could see that somebody can make it. Somebody can make it out from the inner city. Somebody can make it out and go do what they want to do. And that's a testament again to my parents. But when I look at those students that I were able to teach at Washington, there are a lot of those, many of those who have made big contributions to society.
Absolutely, and Dr. Kilgore was an absolute legend.
Legend.
Um, I'm going to ask my team to share a photograph, if they will, at this time, before we go to the question from Miss Jane or Mr. James. Um, the picture is up, and you see Cabral Huff. I am in the middle, and the gentleman next to me on the right side is my dad, is Richard Mobley, and Cabral was I was awarded at Ralph J. Bunch Middle School the support staff of the year person, and Cabral came and he was my speaker for me being the support staff of the year. And so that's what 25 years ago Cabral Huff looked like there with my dad. Thank you guys for sharing that photograph with us for this conversation. So brings back brings back a lot of memories, and
A lot of people won't think I can grow that hair anymore. I don't know.
but I want to say thank you again for being my speaker for me. Being the support staff of the year. So I was working as a paraprofessional, and I was working as a media specialist, and I was able to win a media specialist assistant. I wasn't a media specialist, so, so I'll get corrections on things that I say, Cabral. You know from who,
You're all
and
right.
so and so and and it was a great time, and I really appreciate you coming and being that speaker for me.
Anytime.
We have a question from Itland James. Cabral, do you know who that is?
I do.
Yeah, pronounce that name for me, please.
So that's his wife. I don't want to mispronounce her name, but James was my former assistant coach at Voorhees University, and then he became the head coach at Voorhees University, and he's now the assistant coach at South Carolina Beaufort in near Bluffton.
Okay. And so we want to thank Mrs. James for her question. And how has your faith and relationship with God shaped your interactions with recruits in this current basketball climate?
That's a
Thank you
great
for that
question.
question. Wow.
Um, I don't shy away from who I am, um, no matter what. So, as a head coach or assistant coach, I've told recruits that, and I was particularly talking as a head coach. I told recruits what our program was going to be about, that we were going to pray, that we were going to build them as men, and a lot of times that meant, things that came from the Bible. I'm here to say when we were at Edward Waters, when I was at Edward Waters, we had young men give themselves to Christ because of our leadership program that we had. We had the Nation of Coaches and FCA come in and speak to our guys on a bi-weekly basis where they would come watch practice, and then we would have a kind of Bible study, you know, and you'll be amazed how that changes your locker room. And so I'm never going to be afraid of that faith. I'm going to tell them that. I'm going to let the parents know. James knows this. It was on our slideshow that we showed our recruits, our PowerPoint presentation that we showed our recruits who wanted to come, because I don't think you can win without the man above. I don't think that you can change a culture or a program without having the structure and the life skills that the Bible and the teachings of God and Jesus give us. Um, because it's not just about winning on the court. For me, it was about graduating young men and making them better on and off the court. And anybody who's been a part of any program that I've been, whether as assistant or as a head coach, knows that's what I'm about, and I'm going to always be about that. And if you do it, at some point, you'll be able to be successful and win. And I think we've kind of seen that a little bit here lately with, the two national champions in college basketball with Coach Corey Close and with Coach Dusty May, at UCLA and Michigan.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you, Mrs. James, for sharing that great question. We have a question from Kimberly Mobley. What resources or support do you draw on to pour into young people who do not have the foundation you did?
You've got to use your community. So, one of the things that we did is we kind of bring in stakeholders in the community, people who, whether they work somewhere in the community, whether they've been alumni, and we bring those in and we try to get them to reach these young men where they are. Everybody's not on the same playing field. So we've got to reach them where they are. So those are kind of the resources. Other resources is that we've got to keep growing as coaches. We can't stay the same. Like, so we've got to go out and go to conferences. We got to go talk to other people about how we can get better, how we can, impact these young men because things are different and we've got to do things differently. It's not just a conversation all the time. Or excuse me, it's not just meet in my office all the time. Sometimes it means you got to take them to lunch. Sometimes it means you got to go where they are. We've had Madden or Madden tournaments, just to reach them where they are. So it takes a lot. It takes a village. I know people always say that, but that village man is just those people that can pour into these young men that we're able to serve. And if we're able to get the right people around them, then they can see what success looks like. And success isn't always monetarily. Success is what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband, because we always tell them that basketball is just a microcosm of life. And so that adversity that you have in basketball is going to be the same kind of adversity that you may face in life. When you come home and Your wife wants to know how we're going to eat. You can't just say, I don't know. The same way I can't say, I don't know how we're going to get it done or trying to stop the leading scorer in the country. So those things kind of correlate with each other. And we just continue to each day try to make sure they understand through the game of basketball how to succeed.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Kimberly Mobley, for your question. Um, ye, wow, that's a lot. Um, it's a lot because we have a question from Laura Thompson. Uh, what do you think the impact of NCAA NIL rules are on student athletes now that they are over a year into the change?
That's a loaded question right there. I'm all for student athletes being able to get paid for their services because if we're the truth being told, the NCAA was making a whole lot of money off student athletes way back when Ed O'Bannon, you know, tried to get this to all happen with UCLA. Um, the problem that I have with it is the combination of NIL and the transfer portal. And why I have a problem with it is because for us as black men, and you know this, Tony, we've got to get that degree. And if you continue to transfer, more than likely you're losing credits every time you transfer. And if
Mm.
that's the case, you're never going to graduate. So I'm gonna put it to you even plainly. Like if you continue to transfer and you finish playing, well, you don't even have a everyone knows how great the Spell House homecoming is. People can talk about G-Ho at North Carolina A&T. They can talk about any homecoming, even at a PWI. But you don't have a home. You don't have a place to go because you've never graduated one at any place. Or even let's say you do, you were only there
You
1 year.
drop something that a lot of people are not going to get. So you got to go back to the spell house and what you were saying
Okay, that's
because
the Spell.
everybody's not going to get that.
Spelman and Morehouse, being sister and brother schools, they have their homecoming together every year. And it's a big deal. It's one of probably the top five homecomings. You know, like I said, next to Geo, which is North Carolina A&T, Hampton, Howard, and I think FAM. I think those are the top five, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but you don't have a home, like you don't have a family. You know, my three best friends came from my times at Morehouse. Like those are my three best friends. Are you going to get that when you transfer all those different times? And then I think about the mental health of these young men. Like, would I love to have gotten some of the money that some of these young men have gotten to play the game of basketball or football or whatever sport, or even young ladies? I surely would. But what happens when you don't get to play professionally or you stop playing professionally? So you made $1 million as a college basketball athlete, right? And maybe you get to go play overseas somewhere because we got to be realistic that everybody's not going to play in the NBA. So that stops. And now you have to get a regular job. So maybe you were the one that graduated, but that regular job, no matter what your degree says, let's say you only make, I'll give you $90,000, which is at the high end. That's your first salary for a job. What is that young man's mental health when he realizes I made more than this playing basketball in college? What are you telling me? I
Mm.
got to wake up 8 in the morning, get to work at 8, leave at 5. I got to be in an office every day to make $100,000. I was making 10 times that playing basketball. I feel in a few years, if we don't really pour into these young men and women in college, that they understand it's more than just the money, that we're going to have some issues with mental health with these student athletes somewhere down the road. Um, so I think the NCAA threw it out there, both things, and kind of the cat got out the bag before they put some parameters on it. So we are where we are right now. The flip side of that, maybe I don't like all the things that are going on, but I've got to adapt or I'm going to die in the college basketball realm. So as a college coach, I've got to adapt to what's going on. I've got to live with it. We've got to make sure we get the right basketball players here at Newberry or at any other place that I was, and we got to roll with the punches.
Yeah, I really had not thought about the mental health aspect of it, and I can only imagine that there is a lot of sort of depression and that kind of thing
Yes.
when your careers winding down, or you know been out of it for several years and you were used to this kind of income and now you're not able to recoup anywhere near what you were making at that time. So
I mean, think
I
of this.
I
Think of this, Tony. As adults, as men, if we change jobs and we have to take a pay cut, that does something to us right now, no matter how
mm,
old we are, right? So that's the aspect of these are 18 to 24-year-olds who are making all this money. They get to 30 and they may never make that much money or close to it again. So what
wow.
is that mental? And now you're talking about maybe you have to raise a family. So what are we doing? Like I think every college program has to have something that deals with mental health, something that deals with how they're going to invest their money. Like, what are we doing? Because if they're going to get this money and maybe they invest it the right way or save it, they'll have some later on. But if all we're doing is going out and buying a Lamborghini, paying everybody in our family, unfortunately, in 2 years, we may not have a dime of what we got when we were playing college basketball.
uh wow. I'm stunned because we have another question from Kimberly Mobley. Talk a little bit about your expectations for your parents had for you, and do you share those with young adults you work with?
So, being the only child, my parents definitely had me as they were older. And I don't shy away from telling my players or telling people that I come in contact with, they were strict. Like my mom was very strict. I wasn't able to go certain places that other people were able to go. She didn't know what was going on there. Uh, and she had a certain standard that she had for me and wanted out of me. And if I didn't meet that standard, then there were consequences. And I think it's the kind of standard that I hold still to this day to my players in my program and people that I meet that are even in my circle. Um, I talk to people that are in my circle, other men, and we have real conversations about what we shouldn't and we should be doing. That's not right. And sometimes it may be stuff that we don't like. And Tony, and just like Kim was writing the question, you both know my mom was straightforward to the punch. Whether you liked it or not, she was going to tell you how it was. But 9 times out of 10, she was right. I'm not quite like like my mom in that, but I do hold you to a standard. Like I'm going to hold these young men to a standard every day, a standard that they can uphold, um, as long as they do the right thing, and that's doing the right thing when somebody's watching and when somebody's not watching. I think that's the standard and the expectation that my parents always had for me. And if I didn't do that, there were consequences. My mom and dad didn't shy about what those consequences were, but it was all for the betterment of me. And I think many times people think young men and women these days don't like discipline. And in reality, they do. We just have to make sure that we're giving it to them in a proactive and corrective way.
Yeah, I'm hearing my friend Jerry talking as you were talking, and I'm seeing all the images and all of the things. Laura Thompson is back. What is the current experience of recruiting in college athletics with the transfer rules and other challenges? Um, I work in athletics on the academic side at a D1 school, but I don't get to talk to them until after the process is complete.
But one of the big things, I'll start with kind of the end of her question. One of the big things that we've always done is to include um, the academic side when we were recruiting someone. So that meant meeting maybe the dean of whatever they wanted to major in, meeting the people that are going to help them academically. Right now I'm an assistant basketball coach, but I'm also an academic success coach. So I hold two hats here at Newberry, where I get to meet with a lot of student athletes and regular students about how are we going to get right. That's the way I put it. How are we going to get right when it comes to your academics? Because if we don't, then we're going to be in trouble, right? They're going to be in trouble, whether that means you're going to lose your financial aid, that means you're going to be put on probation academically, or whatever the case may be. So I think we have to continue to tie those things in when we're talking about recruiting. It's not just about the sport we're recruiting them for, but it's also about the academic portion of it. I probably have some more people who are on here listening, but they know who I am. I've had young men who wanted to transfer to me who I didn't take because to me it was all about them graduating. I don't care what kind of basketball. You can help me win basketball games, but I knew you transferring into me meant you were going to lose credits, which meant you were not going to graduate. And I want to see every student athlete get that degree. Tony, could you go back to that first part of the question? I want to make sure I hit that first part if you can.
What is the current experience of recruiting in college athletics with the transfer rules and other challenges?
So right now, I think where we have kind of gone astray in college athletics is the relationship piece. Back in the day, the relationship piece was how you were able to get a student athlete to commit to your school. Like you built so much in the relationship with who their circle was and who they were and what they liked. Now, a lot of times, especially at the Division I level, it is just about the money. But I still think it comes down to relationships. Um, because I tell people, been kind of dealing with some things in recruiting where you have people who leave your program and go somewhere else because the money may have been good, but yet they come back because they realize no amount of money can 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 break a relationship when you know somebody really cares about you. And I think we have to just continue to get back to that. The money's not going to stop and it's not going to change. But we have to keep those real relationships with these young men and these young women in college athletics so we can kind of get back to what we really are. And they're student athletes. That's what we really got to get back to.
Do you think your faith journey has enabled you to be able to pour into your students in that way?
Definitely. You know, obviously I grew up in the church and Tony, I was always, big in the church, always going, always, trying to, read the Bible, pray. But I think every person in their faith journey has moments of despair, is what I call them. And for me, where I knew faith had to come, I say faith came back to me. When I lost my parents, that quickly, my mom in August and my dad in February, that quick, I lost a lot of faith. And I've told people this story. That was tough because you're asking, whether you want to or not, you're asking God why, right? And so I went through probably about a year to 2 years where that faith wasn't the same, right? But when you get back on track, when God starts speaking to you and you having those moments of I don't know how I'm here because it's not because of me, but it's because of God. Then that faith journey, you can give that faith journey to a young man who's not understanding why he's not playing as a freshman, or a young woman who's not understanding, why the shots aren't falling right now. Um, that faith journey that they can really dive into you because those young men and women are watching us every day, everything that we do, whether we think so or not. Just like kids watch their parents, players watch their coaches. Not just what you say, but what you do. So I think that faith journey definitely is something big for the players that I've been able to coach. And I speak life into them. I talk about my faith. I talk about my struggles, of what I went through. We deal have done a lot, with our program in different places of what we call hopes, heroes, uh, highlights, and where we get to dive deeply into who they are. Who's your hero? What's your highlight? So things of that nature.
Wow, wow. Thank you, Laura Thompson of Texas, for that great question. And again, um, as an educator, please talk about your experience in the classroom.
Um, that was I don't
And talk, and you can also talk about You've had a varied experience in terms of the classroom
Mm.
because you were in historically inner city high school. You worked in a private high school, and you also worked in what would be considered a large suburban high school. So just talk about those three different environments.
All of them are the same. And what I mean by that is that they're just young people who want to soak up the knowledge that you're trying to pour out to them. Um, But each one of my situations was different because at the inner city, what they would call an inner city school in Booker T, Washington, um, I was an English teacher, or even in Cedartown, Georgia, which is a rural high school. I was an English teacher. So you're trying to get young men and women, to pass a test, but to really understand what the English language is about, why literature is important, um, why Shakespeare mattered, all that kind of thing, all those kind of things to where I went to a suburban school at Duluth High School, and ironically, I was an ISS person. So I'm now
Mm.
getting young men and women who have done something they shouldn't have. But even in those moments, you're able to speak into them and tell them why they should change. And you won't reach everyone. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're going to reach every young man and woman that comes through that door. You won't, but you're going to try. And that's what I think I was able to do even in that aspect. And then I flipped to the private schools where I just taught leadership. Like I taught a leadership class to seniors, and we just talked about life and what happens in life and different things. I remember at Holy Innocents Episcopal School, which is predominantly, Caucasian, but you do have, African Americans and other ethnicities there. But you're having those seniors watch the 92 documentary about the riots in LA because a lot of
Oh.
them obviously weren't born, right? Um, but had no idea why there was a riot or what went on. And you get them to see things differently. And so, in reality, what teaching is, no matter whether you're inner city, suburban, private school, doesn't matter, it's getting them to use their brains to think critically, to think outside the box. Because as you continue to move along in this world, that's what it's about. Everybody's not the same. Every situation is not the same. But are you able to think critically and outside the box to get to that next level of success, whatever success means for you, whatever success means for your family? And I think in all those situations that I've been placed in teaching, I think I was able to do that. And I only say that because I've had young men and women say, about the experiences that we shared in all those places.
As you were sharing that, I was thinking about this conversation that I have all the time, and regardless to what environment I find myself in, I'm always talking about the difference between being educated and being trained.
Mm.
And as I was hearing you talk about your experiences in high school, in variety, and it didn't seem to matter in what environment you were in, that you were about educating them and not training them. And so, can you talk just a little bit more about that part of it?
I think that means you have to go outside the curriculum. When you're an English teacher, you've got to do much more. I wasn't just teaching what the Odyssey was about. I was putting that quote on the board and say, let's talk about it. What does that quote mean to you? You know, um, even outside my office right now, I put a quote on the week. So if students come in, they're coming to meet with me. And obviously, many times it's about their academics. And the quote this week says, provide opportunity, eliminate excuses. So if you were
Mm.
a student, you're just thinking about what does it mean to provide opportunity and eliminate excuses. And again, I go back. If we're trying to, it's not just about finding a job. If you're at the college level, it's not just about getting a high school diploma so you can go to college, but it's about how you're going to fight through to understand how you're going to succeed, right? So you got to figure out a way as a man, woman, how you're going to provide opportunities for yourself and your family and eliminate those excuses because there's going to come adversity every time, no matter what. How are you going to eliminate those excuses so that you can provide an opportunity to better yourself for you and your family? And I go back to my parents. We talked about that at the very beginning. My parents didn't make an excuse, right? And I'm here to share like I remember them paying for private school, right? and understanding how hard that was for them when, at that time I just thought, oh, we're eating breakfast for dinner. But it was because that was the cheapest thing to eat for dinner because they were coming out their pocket a little bit more because they wanted me to have a great basis, a foundation by going to private school, first through fifth grade.
That's an amazing story to tell, and I think that you should share a little bit more about that. And I don't know as much about the early years, but I do know a lot about the later years in terms of the journey that they were willing to sacrifice for. But I want you to talk about the mindset that your mother was extremely direct, and she she never sugarcoated stuff, and no matter who you were, she gonna get you straight,
Yep.
and she gonna tell it like it is, and I love her for that. But talk about why it was so important for her that you told the line, that you were always in church, that you were that a lot of young people today don't have any kind of structure like that. And just talk a little bit more about the what it means to you now as you are able to, because during that time I'm sure you felt like they were extremely strict,
Right.
but what it means for you now.
I'm so grateful that they were who they were for me, right? And what I mean by that is, like, I think my parents, me going to college and graduating college, I think honestly, and I say this was much more important to them even than it was to me,
Mm.
because I think every parent, and I haven't been blessed to have kids yet, but Tony, you do, you want better for your kids than you have for yourself. And so I go back to my mom who grew up in Perry Homes, one of the projects here in Atlanta, Georgia. And my dad who grew up in Oglethorpe County, which is near Athens, Georgia. And they didn't grow up with a lot. Like they didn't, ironically, they both go and work at places for 30 plus years, Georgia National Guard, Raylock, like, so they knew what structure and hanging in there. My parents were the first Black family to move into our neighborhood. Now, obviously, our neighborhood flipped after that, but they were the first Black family to move into the neighborhood by Greenbrier Mall, right, to buy a house. My mom was a person who told me at 21, Cabral, you go buy that house instead of living in an apartment, which was 1 year after I started teaching. Now, if anybody's out there, just think about where your mindset was at 21. Could you really think you could buy a house? But that's how my mom thought. She thought anything was possible, and she instilled that in myself. And then you add how my mom thought anything was possible, and you add the hard work of my dad. Like my dad was one of like the way he showed love was how he provided, and his provision was because he worked his tail off every day, not just at work. Like I remember coming home one time after my mom passed away, and I couldn't find him. His car was outside, and I'm looking in the house. He's not there. I thought I looked outside in our backyard pretty well. I guess I didn't. So I sat there for about 3 hours and said, well, maybe somebody from church took him to lunch or took him to, my dad was outside working in his garden for 3 hours. And
Mm.
Tony, like he would give you peppers. He would give like anything that was in that garden, he would give people. So I think that combination of those two things and the structure that they gave me. And as I grew older, I learned that the structure and the sacrifice was necessary to succeed. Like I couldn't come home and not have a conversation with my mom about, or my dad about, well, how was school today? Right? There was a certain expectation about what kind of grades I got. Even when I got to college, like we didn't get the FERPA laws and HIPAA laws about you can't show your parents your grades. Okay. She don't want to know what that test score was. Tony, there was no hiding from Geraldine Huff. There was
No,
she's gonna
no,
find it
there,
out.
No, there was no hiding. There was absolutely no hiding. And I do want to say this about your dad, and I want anybody who's working with a house of faith to hear me well when I say this. I don't know anybody who worked as hard as he did for the houses of worship that he was connected to.
Correct.
I mean, he was on it. And if the doors were open, if there was a need, he provided it.
Hmm.
And I, I think about that now, and in terms of, um, you know, the way people now think about the work in the church.
Right.
That was a priority. Was, he took care of house, he took care of home first, but he was a dedicated servant. And so when I hear or see you talking about being a servant leader, I think about your dad in terms of how he was about the business of the work in the church also, and how dedicated he was to that.
And
And
if and, and, if,
I
and if you go back and it kind of ties into both of them, like I remember, obviously you're there at Sunday school and Sunday service, and if there was anything later in church that night, you were there. But I think we had, I'm getting a little older now. I can't remember the actual name, but it was where the teenagers got together. That was Monday nights.
mhm.
Bible study was Wednesday nights. And I remember times there were things on Saturday. So if I wasn't playing sports or doing something else that had to go on, guess where I was at least 4 nights a week at church.
Yeah, yeah. And I also reflect on how many times I was in that kitchen with your mom, regardless to whether it was Butler Street or Zion Hill. How we were always, working and doing different things in terms of preparing meals for different worship experiences. I remember very distinctly. She was also Pastor Parker had me at Butler Street, being the minister for evangelism,
Yep.
and he put your mom on my team, and I was very happy to have your mom on my team for evangelism. And so that was such a great experience there, in the fellowship that we had, working in the church and cooking meals and sharing with the other, I'm just going to say the other saints and the
Yep.
membership of the church. um Again, this is a rare opportunity. I want to reach out to YouTube again and say, if you have some questions, please ask your questions. Um, how should parents prepare for recruitment by you or a university you're working with?
Ooh, I think they've got to be open-minded. They've got to understand to to choose a place for the people and the place. A lot of times we choose one or the other, but I think you got to choose both. Um, Even in this time of transferring, because you've got to choose somebody, man or woman, for your son or daughter that you know has their best interests at heart. Not someone who's just in it to see how many wins they can get. So you got to make sure you choose the right people that can pour into your son or daughter. And you've got to choose the right place, like the right fit. I think so many times of why we have so many people that transfer is that we're not choosing the right fit. We're choosing it because it looks good to everybody else. Oh, my son or daughter gets to go to UGA. But do they really fit UGA? Is that where your son or daughter even really wants to go? We've got to allow our young men and women to choose what's right for them. You give your input, parents, because those next 4 years, if they get to stay there, it's going. They got to go to a place that's going to make them happy.
Hmm.
Because that's where they're going to blossom is during those college years. So if they go to a place where you wanted them to go, they may not be happy. And that in turn could cause issues. It could cause a freshman not to do well because they want to go home anyway because they didn't want to go to that college period. So we've got to get back to the relationship piece of knowing who's around our son or daughter when it comes to recruitment and what college they choose. And let's choose the best fit. And knowing your son or daughter and knowing what they like and dislike is, we just got to get back to having real conversations. You know, if I go back to my parents, we sat at the dinner table every night now. I know a lot of times we don't do that anymore. Like we sat at the dinner table and she, again, there wasn't a time she wasn't asking me, well, how did your day go? I became an
Mhm.
adult. She was calling me on the phone after I moved out. Talk to me. How's teaching? How's it going? When I remember my mom, even when she got sick, was showing up to my first games I was coaching as a basketball. Or if I even go back, Tony, go getting into coaching when I was coaching Zion Hill's basketball team, those teenagers, and here I am
Yeah.
I'm just a college student, and I'm coaching guys who are about 2 to 3 years younger than me. You know, the experiences, man. We just got to get back to those experiences and relationships.
Yeah. Wow. You know, there's a lot of things are coming back to me right now. I was thinking about that first time that Pastor Parker was called to Butler Street, and I don't think he had been there. I don't think he had even been there a month yet. And your mom invited him and Mrs. Parker over for dinner, and some strange reason I got an invitation too. And I really, I'm gonna be transparent and say I really don't even understand why I was included in that, other than at that time I was not married, and that I was kind of like, when Pastor Parker was around, I was kind of wherever everywhere he was, and so maybe that's why I got the invitation. And and your mother just laid it out. I mean, it was such a it was, she brought out her china and her glassware and her all of these, all of these things, and the meal was fantastic. And I remember very distinctly, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me. We had we had salad and soup, and I believe the soup was a cheese soup. Do you remember that? Do you?
I don't remember the kind of soup, but I remember the instance. I just don't remember the kind of soup.
Yeah, it was like, it was just totally amazing. It was, I mean, this full spread, and china and glassware and all of these things, and I think all of us had a fantastic time, and that was the beginning of me, being able to put my feet under the table over over there at your parents' house.
I
Um,
just I think about, they were so multifaceted. Like you talk about my mom as a cook, and she could cook, as they say,
yeah,
but she could also do hair. Like I remember times people coming over and she was doing their hair because ironically, that was the degree she had, right? Like she had a cosmetology degree. Um, but also working for Georgia National Guard, she was the pay supervisor, getting all those Georgia National Guardsmen paid. Or my dad being able to, he probably could have had his own lawn service. If it was these times where people want to be entrepreneurs, that probably should have been my dad having his own lawn service. Like,
yeah. They the joke about, Jamaican having, multiple jobs,
yeah,
that really sort of, I mean, it really, I'm not trying to be offensive, but
yeah,
I mean that Willie Huff would work and work and work. He was always doing something, and he had that truck, and he was doing stuff with that truck, and you might find him, helping somebody out here and there, and
hmm
he never met a stranger. That was the other thing
never,
about your dad.
never,
He never met
never
a
met a stranger
stranger. He
ever.
never met a stranger. And uh, I'm looking at YouTube and I don't see any questions in YouTube. So, all right, YouTube, you made a mistake in then not asking Coach Huff any more questions. So I'm going to reach out to my team. Do we have? I just want to make sure we don't have any more questions from YouTube. Okay, I'm gonna. I don't have anybody in my ears, and I don't see anything. So, um, what's the next question that we have, team? If you can let me know. Okay, I'm just going to go to. Okay, please talk about your faith journey and the amazing faith content that you are producing on social media. I'm so glad we got to get to this question. So please talk about that because I just been blown away by the not even just the quality of what you're doing, but the the volume of it. So just talk about it, please.
It it's amazing. So after I lost a bit of my faith when my parents died, when I gained that back, that's kind of when that Twitter, which is now X, kind of was taking off then, right? And so that was kind of my start. Like I want to pour into other people. And so that was, kind of how I started, just pouring into to other people, thoughts that would have come to mind. Maybe it was something I heard, I read, that I just wanted to share, inspirational or faith-based. And I remember getting my first collegiate basketball job. And Tony, this really stuck with me. And it's nothing against him because it wasn't anything bad for him. But the first coach I worked for at Georgia Southern, he brought me in the office one day. He said, Coach, I have no problem with your faith and what you post on social media. But if you want to make it in this business, you may not want to do that. And I remember distinctly telling him, well, then I don't, this is not the business I want to be in if somebody's going to not allow me to be who I am and what God is telling me to do. And so that
Wow.
was kind of a motivation to keep going. And then somewhere about probably before COVID, Tony, if I'm being honest, sometimes you get to those moments where you're like, well, I'm just saying this stuff to myself, right? I don't need to share it to everybody. I can just keep it to myself. So I stopped doing it for about a week or two. And I remember getting random messages from people, some I knew, some I didn't, who number one said, are you okay? Are you fine? And number two is, why did you stop? Because those keep me
Mm.
going. And to this day, I still get messages.
Wow.
I still get messages like that. Like even today, I had a coworker at work here in Newberry tell me, Coach, I just love those messages, especially the ones early in the morning. Because I see them before we come to work and I see you and they mean so much. So I usually get them from something I've been reading, maybe a podcast, or maybe it was something that really jumped out to me on a podcast or a sermon, something that stuck with me. And sometimes I see images, sometimes I create the image like based off something I saw. And I just want to share it to the world because I want to continue to be a light. That's what God asks us to do is to be a light, shine that light for him on the others, right? And if I can touch one person a day with something I say on social media, right? And then my internal prayer is I need to continue to make sure that my words and my actions and my posts match up with who I am, right? So that's kind of like all right, get on track, Huff. You got to do what's right, Cabral. Like you don't want to be the person that's saying all these things on this post and you're not living it up to, in your life. We're gonna make mistakes. We all are. Um, but I think it's my personal faith and spiritual journey that I'm sharing. Now, if you would have talked to my cousin Robert on my dad's side, he would say, "Now they told you back in the day when you were growing up in the country that you were gonna be a preacher." So I don't know about that yet. I mean, maybe God's still working on me, but I do want to continue to share the message that God continues to share with me. Sometimes it even goes further. There may be some people that are listening that we have different relationships with people, some coaches, some friends that you send messages to because you know what they're going through. And you want to just make sure that they understand there's a light at the end of their path, right? And Tony, I probably haven't shared this with a lot of people. So I felt we were doing great things at Edward Waters, right?
Hmm.
But sometimes we don't, the people that hire us don't feel the same way. And I remember people in college basketball said, you haven't been in college basketball until you've been let go. I had
Mm.
never been let go of any job I had ever been at in life. So for about a month and a half, that's a tough pill to swallow. And so a lot of those messages here recently during that time were my pick me up. Like there's something behind this that God's really, really showing you. And what he did was place me here in Newberry to kind of get back to the roots of being an educator, right? An academic
Hmm.
success coach, but still being a assistant basketball coach. Um, I think sometimes we talk about let's be the co-pilot. I don't want to be the co-pilot with God. I just want to be the passenger princess. No, no harm intended. So wherever God wants to lead me, I'm willing to go. Like I've stopped trying to build my own plan, and He has even more so during this time shown me continually, I got you. If you just listen and do the deeds, I got you. And what you told me you wanted, I'm gonna push you down that path. And sometimes you got to get a
Fantastic.
kick. You got to get people that, when you get a little down, that tell you the right things and tell you what you need to do. So um, I just continue to try to pour into others with those messages every day.
Do you remember the first time that I came over to your house and I started playing basketball with you guys? Do you remember that?
Is this the first time I dunked the basketball? Or was that
No,
after?
you had the hoop in your backyard,
Yeah. Mhm.
and I think Paul and Marcus were there also,
Yep.
and y'all kind of looked at me, and I don't think y'all thought I could play.
You
Um,
had said a lot of things about playing, and we were like, okay.
and so I remember very very distinctly. Y'all had this expression on your face after I did a few things out there on the backyard. But how long have we known each other?
I probably, I probably was around somewhere between 10 and 12 when we first met.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
as you go into that story, I've got to say this, you may not. That's why I felt so good when I got that first alley oop dunk and I kind of hung on your back. 'Cause-
Yeah, team, if you can share that photograph one more time. Again, I want to thank you so much for being my primary speaker for me being support staff of the year at Ralph J. Bunch Middle School, also a NASA school,
Yeah.
and we were connected to the Skylab. So we're down to the last question, and
Okay.
the last question is: you are speaking to the world. What do you want the world to know?
Be authentically you and who God has called you to be. Don't allow the world and even social media, even though I use it, to make you think you have to be anything else but who God has called you to be. Because what God has called you to be is beautiful, excellent, intelligent, smart, resourceful, determined, dependable, extraordinary. Because the thing that takes ordinary to extra is just a little extra. Continue to
Wow.
serve, continue to lead, and again, just be who God called you to be.
And that is a product of a person who has been in the church all of their life and has graduated from Morehouse College with an English degree. Thank you, Cabral Huff, so
Thank
much
you.
for being here.
Thank you.
And we want to thank we want to thank those of you who are watching on YouTube for being here. You can watch Conversations with Tony Mobley on YouTube or my website, conversationswithtonymobley.com. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by Claudia Lopez Waterman. Our current team includes Laura Thompson, Zachary Sorensen, Mickey McAture. We want to say thank you, sir, and thank you, team. We also want to let people know that we are looking for volunteers. If you are interested in learning the professional switching network software Mimo Live, please reach out to us on our website. We have conversations with real people. Stay tuned for new episodes and great conversations on Conversations with Tony Mobley. When you have time, we ask that you go back and look at some of the nearly almost 200 conversations that we have had on Conversations with Tony Mobley. I think you will find something that you like and is hopefully helpful to you. Again, thank you, Cabral Huff,
Thank
for
you.
being a part of our conversation today, for doing the work you do, and for being the person who you are. On Conversation with Tony Mobley next week, the OG, the original guest of Conversation with Tony Mobley, Dr. Hazmak Gaijar. He's going to be giving us an update on what he is doing. It's been a while since Dr. Gaijar has been with us, so we're looking forward to that conversation next week. Please feel free to support Conversations with Tony Mobley by volunteering your time or donating to keep Conversation with Tony Mobley running. You can donate on our website. Please like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. We want to keep getting better on Conversations with Tony Mobley on YouTube. Again, we want to thank everyone so much for participating in this conversation that I've had with my son's godbrother, Mr. Coach, academic leader, and basketball coach, Cabral Huff. Thank you, Cabral, again.
Thank you.
Take care. We want to say good night and God bless to each and every person that is here on YouTube. Cabral, don't leave.
Okay.
We want to say good night and God bless to everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.